Now, when you think about Calvinism, and I may do a whole study on Calvinism when we're finished with this whole series here, but Calvinism logically fits together. It's a very logical system. It fits together from one point to the next point to the next point, just as logical as can be. And in reality, if you accept any bit of Calvinism, you have to swallow the whole thing. You can't just, although these people don't, and of course most human beings aren't always logical, they don't always behave in a logical way, but if you accept total depravity, you're logically compelled, if man can't make a choice, if man has no free will, then you're logically compelled to accept unconditional election, that God has to make the choice. There's no way around that. And if God has to choose who's going to be saved, then you're logically compelled to accept limited atonement. Christ only died for those people God chose. He didn't die for everybody. And since you're unable to respond, you're logically compelled to accept irresistible grace, that God has to zap you with the Holy Spirit in order for you to be saved. And then if you accept all of that, then this is of God, it's all of God, it can't fail. So you're logically compelled to accept once saved, always saved. So Calvinism is very logical. The problem with Calvinism is it's not biblical. It's as logical as can be, but it's not biblical. And this is the whole problem with theology to begin with. Theologians come up with a framework of some kind to try and explain all the Bible. And when they come up with this framework, then they have to take everything in the Bible and bend it to fit the framework. That's the problem with theology. Instead of just looking at the Bible and seeing what it says, they come up with this framework. This is what we believe, or this is what we think, and then all the scriptures have to be twisted to bend to fit that, you see. And that's the whole problem. But with Protestantism as in general, and I'm talking about Baptists, Methodists, Presbyterian, whatever, you're going to be dealing with three issues regarding salvation. And really, if you stop and think about it, if you can't get past these three things, there isn't any point in talking about anything else. What's the point in arguing with a Baptist about instrumental music? When you get done, you still ain't baptized him. You see what I'm saying? It's a pointless argument. Not that the issue's not important, it is. But if you can't get past the whole salvation thing, then you're dead in the water anyway. So this is really the bottom line here. The first one, and I'm at point number one on the outline, the first doctrine of Protestantism that most of them have in common, almost every Protestant shares this idea of total hereditary depravity. This thing is everywhere, okay? It cuts across denominational lines. I think some of our brethren even accept this to one extent or another. Hopefully they're few and far between, but sometimes you have to wonder by the things that they say, you have to wonder, have they not bought into this? But the ideal is, now notice there's three words, and they all three have to go together. First of all, there's depravity. We'll start with that one. What's depravity? Yeah, it's wickedness, it's depraved behavior, excessive, wild behavior. And then hereditary, what are we saying with that? It's inherited, it's in the genes, okay? And then total hereditary depravity means that this has touched you, every part of your being. And so this is the doctrine, or part of the doctrine of Calvinism, and also part of the doctrine of probably 90%, if not more, of Protestant denominations. They almost all accept this to a group, to a man. And there's two basic ideas. Number one, and here comes the heredity part, we inherit Adam's sin. Now, right off the bat, that should strike us as being unjust. Why would you be held responsible for something somebody else did? That doesn't make any sense. It's like some guy commits a murder, and instead of finding his killer, we're just going to pick this guy right here and put him to death for it, for the murder. You don't hold somebody else responsible for what another person did. And that's what they do. Well, we inherited Adam's sin. That doesn't make any sense. It doesn't pass the smell test, and we'll talk more about that in a minute. But that's that. And the second part of that is, not only do you inherit Adam's sin, but you inherit this corrupt nature. So this is part of what comes in through the genes. Your nature has been so corrupted because of what Adam did that you can't even want to do the right thing. It's not within you. You're just always programmed, almost like a robot. You're going to sin. You're programmed to it. You can't help it. You're going to do it. Now, it strikes me, and you don't hear as much about it now because they've moved on beyond this argument and moved on to the transgender stuff, but back about 20 years ago, when you talk to the homosexual movement, what did they always say? How you're born that way. Born that way. And I always thought, well, I'd love to see a debate between a Baptist and a homosexual. Because that homosexual will feed that Baptist right out of his own spoon. This is your doctrine. You believe in inherited sin. All I'm saying is I inherited homosexuality. It's your doctrine. And he'd feed him right out of his own spoon because they teach the same thing, that sin is inherited. Of course, the homosexual wouldn't say it was sinful, but still the behavior has been inherited is what they're basically saying. And that's what the Protestants are saying, that you've inherited a corrupt nature. The truth of the matter is when a child is born, this nature is not corrupt. It's pure and holy and hasn't done anything wrong and hasn't even had time to develop any kind of a nature, whether good or bad. But that's one doctrine that you have to contend with Protestants. The second one, and again, we're going to break each of these down as we go through. The second one is the doctrine of salvation by faith only. And when they say faith only, what they mean is there's nothing for you to do. There are no works that are required. You don't have to repent. You don't have to be baptized. You don't have to attend services. You don't have to do anything at all. Okay? All you have to do is believe. And so you have that out there. And again, that's everywhere. Almost every Protestant to a man believes this. Okay? They may not accept all of Calvinism, but they'll accept that tenet, that idea of salvation by faith alone. The third one is the doctrine of once saved, always saved. Almost all Protestants. There are some exceptions. I know that, and you know that as well. You've come across some of those people. But most Protestants will believe the idea of once saved, always saved. That once you've been saved by the Lord, you cannot be lost no matter what you do. I didn't bring it with me, but I got a quotation from a Baptist preacher. And he said in a debate one time that you could commit every sin from idolatry to murder. And it wouldn't affect your soul one bit, wouldn't affect your salvation. Now, you just think about that. Now, to me, that's an invitation to low living. Why wouldn't I, if that's true, why wouldn't I just go out and live it up and just do whatever? Because I'm going to go to heaven anyway. And so that's right. A lot of them do that. They do live that way. And so those three things, almost universally across the board, with very few exceptions. I want to make sure I say there are some exceptions, but very few exceptions almost across the board. You'll find that in most Protestant groups. They don't always accept the unconditional election that God chooses who's going to be saved. Some of them believe in free will, that you choose whether you'll believe in Christ or not. They don't all accept the limited atonement, that Christ only died for a select few people, that he didn't die for everybody. And they don't necessarily accept the irresistible grace, that, again, you still have the free will. So they reject part of Calvinism and accept part of Calvinism. So you've got that mixture out there. Let's take these one at a time. Number 2 on your list, total hereditary depravity. Man is born sinful and inherits a sin nature from Adam. And here are some of the passages they use. Romans 5:12. These aren't the only passages, by the way. But these are probably some of the more popular ones. Somebody, if you beat me over there to Romans 5:12, go ahead and read it for me.
Therefore, just as through one man sin entered the world, and death through sin, and thus death spread to all men because all sinned.
See? Inherited sin. That's what they would say. They believe that verse teaches inherited sin. One man, who's that one man? That's Adam. He brought sin into the world, and he brought death into the world. And so death spread to everybody, see? Everybody sins now because Adam sinned. Except there's one little problem with that. Can you see it? Yeah. And if you look at that very last phrase, you're all right in what you say, but because all sin. It's not because they inherited it from Adam. That's not why. That's the way they want you to read that. They want you to read it as though death through sin and death spread to all men because they inherited it from Adam. That's the way they want you to read that, but that's not what that says. Death spread to all men because all men sinned. Sin is something you do. Okay? It's not something you're born with, it's something you do. So that verse fails. but that's one of their, believe it or not, that's one of their most popular texts that they use to supposedly prove inherited depravity. That's why just because a preacher quotes the Bible doesn't mean that he's quoting it accurately, and it doesn't mean he's using it properly. You always put that to the test. They can quote that verse all day long, but it still doesn't prove inherited sin. Okay. The other one that they like a lot is in Ephesians 2. And we've talked about this a lot of times, where he says they were by nature the children of wrath. Ephesians 2 and verse, I think it's 3, isn't it? Yeah. Among whom we also once conducted ourselves in the lust of the flesh, fulfilling the desires of the flesh and of the mind, and were by nature children of wrath just as the others. And they play on that word nature, you know. Well, I have green eyes by nature, and I used to have brown hair by nature. It's not brown anymore. You are 6 foot tall or 5'5" by nature, by birth. That's what was programmed into your genes, see? And so they're using the word nature in that sense. And that is one usage of the word nature, okay? There's no doubt about that. But the truth of the matter is nature has a lot of different uses, okay? And another usage of nature is, okay, a spiritual nature. Can you think of? A learned nature. There you go. And I've often used the illustration. It is my nature when I get up in the morning to have coffee. Now, I wasn't born drinking coffee, but that has become my learned habit, see? And so that can become nature. We sometimes call that second nature. It's like second nature to him, you know. And so that's the way it's being used here, and you can see that from the context. In verse 2, he talks about the way they once walked. When you walk, that's a lifestyle. And in verse 3, we once conducted ourselves. That's a lifestyle. And because of that lifestyle, sin became your habit. It became like second nature to you. That's really what Ephesians 2 is saying. Go ahead. Yeah.
Man has a nature, or they're inclined to sin, or why would they have sinned from the very beginning?
Well, we choose to sin.
I know that, but
Yeah.
that's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
If man is a weak, mortal creature, and we're just sinful in our nature.
Well, I think you're on to something. I think you're raising a good issue. There is a sinful nature, but it's not inherited.
No, it's not inherited.
It's developed. You developed it.
I'm not saying it's inherited.
Yeah.
Whatsoever.
Well, I know you're not, and that's what I'm saying. There is a nature there. There is a sin nature, but it was a nature that you developed out of years of habit.
Because I know, man's going to sin. We're not going to be perfect because Christ was the only one that didn't sin.
Yeah.
So if
But
we're born in this world, we're going to sin.
Yeah, but the reason we sin is not because
We
choose to.
sinful.
Because we choose to. We developed that sinful nature. We did that to ourselves.
It is different than the nature of, like you was talking about,
Right.
the color of your hair,
Yeah.
or how tall you get, or
Yeah.
the color of your eyes.
Yeah.
That natural, we can't make that choice.
Yeah.
That's just
Exactly. And in
we
fact,
make the choice whether or not we sin.
yeah. And in fact, that's the way Paul's using the word nature, just the way you're describing it. We developed this sinful nature. We because of years of habit and years of practicing. And you think about it, you're born in this world, and everything you look at is sin. You see your parents sin, and your siblings sin, and you sin, and your friends sin, and that's all around you. And you talk about peer pressure, there it is. So you're at a disadvantage from that perspective. You're born into a sinful world. Sin is all around you. You're pressured to sin, and so it's easy, real easy to just do that, and then it becomes a habit with you. I saw a hand over here, yes.
It says, we're by nature children of wrath, just as others.
Yeah.
Not just as everybody.
Right.
Because if it wasn't a learned nature, like we're saying,
Right.
everybody would be children of wrath. Everybody would be all alike. We'd all be that way by
Yeah.
Adam's nature.
Right.
We'd all have the same.
Right.
And
Right, because there are people who make a change in their life. Yeah, exactly.
We have different examples. Just take like Noah, found grace in the eyes of the Lord, it said, because he was upright. He was different than,
He was different than the rest of the world.
and he had to be that way, even though everybody around him was.
Yeah. And
Said he walked with God, and he didn't.
incidentally, while I'm on that subject, a lot of us are familiar with the NIV translation, and before 2011, they revised it in 2011, made a lot of big improvements. But before that, it used that phrase sinful nature. Because of that, a lot of people didn't like the NIV. But there is, back to your point, there is a sense in which we have a sinful nature. Not an inherited sinful nature, but an acquired sinful nature by our habits and by our practices. So it is a sin nature. The question is, how did we get it? Were we born that way, or did we develop that in our lives? Yes?
Solomon says, I believe it's Ecclesiastes chapter 5, that God made man upright, but man has sought out many schemes.
So man has sought out many schemes, exactly. And that kind of explains it. We choose, and it's not only do you have, I talked about the world and the background and the pressure, but then there's the fleshly body, that has strong desires and it pulls. So you kind of come into this at a little bit of a disadvantage in the sense that you have a fleshly body and you're in a world of sin, and that's really what David was talking about in Psalm 51. I was brought forth in iniquity. I was born in a world of sin. It's all around me. My mama sinned, I sinned, it's everywhere. And because of that pull, that influence, we do it too,
It's our physical born nature, as you talked about a while ago, as a baby.
Yeah.
We're actually born sinless.
Born sinless, born without sin. Yeah, exactly. We are born pure without sin.
The world that we live in, like you're talking about, has that pull on us where
And then we give into the, yes.
Well, James says it, that we're drawn away of our own
Yes,
desire, our own entice. So that tells us where our sin comes from.
Exactly.
It comes from within. Everybody around me can influence me, and that's, and they can be a bad influence and could make it easy for me to sin. But I don't sin until I make the choice.
exactly.
When I make the choice.
Exactly right. And you?
Is that the reason why Catholics baptize babies?
Yeah,
Because they believe that
yeah. They believe the baby is sinful.
inherited sin.
Yeah, they believe the baby inherited sin, and so they're trying to get rid of that sin.
And think that one through. How pitiful a thought is that, to think that a newborn
Yeah.
baby is laying there in sin.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
pitiful thought.
and here's another one. You want a real twist on that whole thing. The Catholics aren't the only one that baptize babies. There's other groups that baptize babies too. Like I think maybe some Methodists. I'm not 100% sure of that, but there's other Protestant groups that baptize babies. But then they'll turn right around when you get to be an adult and say, "Oh, you don't have to be baptized." How's that for a twist? If you're a baby, you inherited sin, you need to be baptized. But if you're an adult, oh, you don't need to be baptized. Then you talk about twisted and weird. That's twisted and weird. Anything else before I go further? Okay. Point number 2B. Sin is not inherited. That is, it's not genetic. I have green eyes because of my genes. I had brown hair when I was a younger man because of my genes. I am a male because of my genes. Okay? And so that's not the way sin comes into our life. Sin is not in your genes. It's not part of your genetic makeup. Sin is a choice. It is an act of the will. And I think Keith was making that point a while ago, that we may be at a disadvantage in a world of sin and in a fleshly body, but we don't sin and we're not guilty of sin until we make the choice to commit that sin. Okay? And you look at the definition of sin, 1 John 3:4. Whoever commits sin transgresses also the law. Notice that. Sin is not a genetic trait. Sin is a choice. I choose to transgress the law. Now, I may not know that it's against the law. If I'm real young and I don't know the Bible and not been taught, I may not know that it's against the law, but it's still against the law. And I still did it. You may go into a new city and you may not know that their speed limit is only 20 miles an hour. But you still, if you break the law, they're going to give you a ticket. See? So ignorance is not an excuse. You break the law, you break the law. And sin is just that. It's breaking the law. That's something you do. It's not something you're born with, it's something you do. Okay? Something that you practice, that you choose to do. And James 1, let's go over there and take a look at that. And I think Keith alluded to that earlier. James 1, verse 13 to 15. Let no one say when he's tempted, I'm tempted by God. So don't lay the blame for this off on God. Because God can't be tempted, number one. And number two, God doesn't tempt anybody. He's not the source of your temptations. But each one is tempted. Now notice, he didn't say each one sins. Each one is tempted. And that's true, we're all tempted. But each one is tempted when he's drawn away by his own desires and enticed. So you have desires. That goes back to that fleshly body. Fleshly body has desires. I might desire a new car. Okay? Now there's two ways I can get a new car. I can get a job and work for it, pay for it, or I can steal it. See? So I have a desire. There's a right way to fulfill that desire and a wrong way to fulfill that desire. The right way is work for it and pay for it. The wrong way is go steal it. So you have these desires. And then you're drawn away by your desires and enticed. Now, an enticement, that's like when you go fishing. You put bait on your hook. What's that supposed to do? It's supposed to entice that fish. It bring that fish to the hook, see? And you're trying to snare him. Well, that's what the devil's doing. He's the one who puts the bait on the hook. He's the one who gives the enticement. He dangles the enticement before you. And so in a sense, he has a providence. You know, we talk about God's providence, but he has a providence. He can work out situations where that beautiful woman just happens to walk by, like there in Proverbs 7. That beautiful woman happens to walk by and proposition you, like in Proverbs 7. There's the devil putting that enticement before you. Now you can go after that beautiful woman and commit sin, or you can go the other way and not commit sin. That's on you, see. But you have the desire, and then the enticement is hung before you. Let's since I brought that up, let's flip back over there real quick. I think it's Proverbs 7. Yeah. Let's start here with about verse 10. And there a woman met him with the attire of a harlot and a crafty heart. So she's dressed the part. You know, harlots dress in a certain way. And it's advertisement. It says, I'm available. Okay, they dress in a certain fashion. And everybody's able to identify them. She's loud and rebellious. Her feet would not stay home, so she's on the prowl. At times she's outside, at times in the open square, lurking at every corner. Here comes the enticement now. So she caught him and kissed him, enticement number one. She lays one on him, kisses him. With an impudent face, she said to him, so here comes more enticement. These are words now. I have peace offerings with me. Today I paid my vows. So I came out to meet you diligently to seek your face, and I found you. I've spread my bed with tapestry, colored coverings of Egyptian linen. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh, aloes, and cinnamon. Come, let us take our fill of love until morning. Let us delight ourselves with love. Here's the enticing words. Come on, nobody's going to know. It's just me and you. My husband's not home, verse 19. He's gone all alone. Oh, the old man ain't home. We don't have to worry about him walking in on us. He's taking a bag of money with him, which means he's going to be gone a while. Okay? And he'll come home on the appointed day. You don't have to worry about him. And the bed's all ready, and I'm ready, and here you are. Look at this. And so here's the enticement. The devil arranged for that. Okay? With, verse 21, with her enticing, and there's that word, with her enticing speech, she caused him to yield. With her flattering lips, she seduced him. Did he have to do that? That's right. He could have run like Joseph. He could have walked away. You don't have to do this. People, sometimes they get in that situation and say, I couldn't help myself. Oh, yes, you could. Oh, yes, you could. You just chose to give in. And that's what James is talking about there. He's enticed. Then in James 1:15, when the desire has conceived, that is when you act upon it. Okay? Before that, it's just a temptation. But when you act on the temptation, it gives birth to sin. Now you've sinned at that point, when you act on the temptation. And sin, when it's full grown, when it's accomplished, when you've done the deed, brings forth death. Okay, so there it is. And that tells us that you did that. Nobody made you do it. You didn't do it because you were programmed to do it. You did it because you chose to do it. And that's where sin comes from. Our Calvinistic friends are wrong about this, and our Protestant friends are wrong about this. Okay.
The contrast of desire. Talk about, I've lost the verse, Brother Andy, but, he's talking about it's our desire to take up our cross, deny yourself and
Yeah.
follow me.
Oh, that's great. Yeah. There's other desires. Yeah. If anyone desires to come after me, I think it's in Matthew 16, let him take up his cross daily, deny himself, take up his cross daily and follow me. So there's desire to sin, there's desire to serve God. Which one will you follow? Which one will you listen to? Which one will you yield to? See? God puts enticements out there too. What are some of God's enticements? Yeah, that's a big one. Heaven, forgiveness of sins. You got my ear. Anytime you need me, I'm right here. You can pray to me anytime, 24/7. And so God is putting enticements. God is enticing us intellectually, through the mind, through the spirit. Okay? Satan entices us through the flesh. See? So you got Satan pulling one way and God pulling the other way, and we get to cast the deciding vote. Which way am I going to go? That way or that way? Toward God or toward the devil? So it isn't because you can't help it. It isn't because you can't control it. It isn't because you're programmed to do it. It's because you made a choice. And that choice goes either way. You choose to do right or choose to do wrong. And as soon as we lose sight of that, we start making excuses for sin. That's why it's so important to understand that.
Ezekiel 18, the passage in there talks about man turning, changing.
Yeah.
That you can go from serving God to not serving God and you'll be held accountable, or you can go make a change from not serving God to serving God and He'll forgive
And be
you.
blessed.
He makes the point in that passage that it's your choice.
Exactly.
Whether you choose.
Yes.
I do believe, like you're saying, the enticement, God puts enticements in front of us. Well, when we start making the right choices to follow Him, that enticement that He puts in front of us by good living and good fortune and good things that happen to us keeps increasing and increasing and increasing.
Yeah.
Versus the other one, for an example, you may have to wonder, well, who did I do wrong to today? Well, if you're living the correct way, you don't have to have those kind of worries and thoughts or whatever.
Right.
In your head, all those
Right.
are right.
And just as surely as you think about it, just surely as you can develop a sinful nature because you've lived this way so much and done, you can also develop a nature that says, I'd much rather serve God. And your whole life, I mean, this is revolutionary stuff. Paul talked about being transformed by the renewing of your mind. This is life transforming stuff. And it can literally change your whole life. And then God kicks in the blessings on top of that to kind of reinforce all of that. He kicks in the blessings, and every Christian can attest to that. You know, when you serve the Lord. And it's not necessarily that you're going to get rich. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying that you do get blessed. There's a number of different ways you can be blessed with friends, and it can be material blessings as well. It doesn't, but it doesn't necessarily limited to that. It can be other kinds of blessings too. So this whole thing is life transforming for us. Anything else? Yes. Yeah, you have a satisfied mind, peaceful mind. You're not always in turmoil about, what did I do? Did I do the right thing? Because you know you did the right thing. Yeah, exactly.
I've always pretty much, before I become a Christian, I've always pretty much done and lived the way I wanted to. I didn't start living until I wanted to live directly for God. That's when I started living.
Yeah.
Nobody could have told me that. That was something that I had to experience.
Yeah.
I can't even explain how, if you've not been on both sides, you don't know how it is.
Right.
If you've been on both sides, way better over
Yeah.
here. Way better.
It's kind of like what Jesus said, I've come that they might have life and have it more abundantly. You have abundant life here and over yonder. And if you've been on both sides of the fence, you see that. You see the benefit of it, for sure.
Like you say, people that
Yeah.
He said, the Bible says the way of the transgression.
It's hard.
And he said it is.
Yeah.
Think about how much trouble people bring on themselves with the sin they get involved in.
Yep.
You know, that they could, we're all gonna have some troubles. There ain't no guarantee we're not gonna have trouble. But you bring on a lot more troubles. You bring on a lot of things that you wouldn't have to deal with.
And then the amazing thing is these same people who bring all these troubles on themselves will turn right around and lash out at God. God, why did you do this to me? No, God didn't do that to you. You did that to you by making all these bad choices. And then we want to turn around and blame it on God. That's terrible, but it happens. I'm about out of time. Any last minute comments or questions?
I was going to mention, other Friday night, we studied at the house on Psalm 19 down in there, in the one page, I don't remember, it's either 7, 8, or 9, but it talks about that his word converts the soul.
Yeah.
Eric made a point. I said, think about that. That's deeper than we think.
Oh, yeah.
We can understand converting physically or things that might change somebody's life, is be a life changing, but God's word will change you from within.
From inside out. Yeah, it's not just ticking boxes. It's from the inside out. Okay, we'll stop there and pick up where we left off next Wednesday, Lord willing.